You're live. Hello. Hey.
Hello.
Hi, Peter. How are you?
Hi, how are you? Good.
Yeah, I'm good as well. Thank you. No, I today is a special episode because yeah, it's been a while. I haven't done a live podcast, and the last time was with Andrea Toccolini, which is a friend of mine from Kengokuma. It's an architecture practice in Tokyo, a super good one, and I took the decision like last month to start this year with a series of videos on the on the royal palaces of ancient Egypt, and I stopped with the tombs and pyramids, and I said, okay, like it's enough for now. And I was like, okay, let's study actually how the kings lived and how they built their houses and etc. So I was searching and researching, and I found out your name. I was searching for the palace of Deir el Balas, and I was like, wow, why doing? I mean, I'm gonna still do the video on the palace, but first I was
Uh-huh.
like, why not having you talk about it would be even better, right?
Uh-huh.
So for audio for our audience that might not know who you are, let me just introduce you.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm terrible with introducing people, but today our guest is Peter Lacovara, and Dr. Lacovara is the director of the Ancient Egyptian Archaeology and Heritage Fund. He was curator for super prestigious museums, and he was a professor in very well-known universities across the globe. And he excavated at the Valley of the Kings, so amazing. In Malkata, maybe you want to talk about that later a little bit as well.
Okay.
Abydos, Hierakonpolis, and especially Giza. He is currently excavating at Deir el Balas, and he published some really amazing books, which I still haven't had the pleasure to read. Which is one is daily life and urbanism in ancient Egypt, which is everything I want to know about. so the um, so thank you for coming, Peter,
Oh, you're welcome.
to my humble
Uh-huh.
podcast and ancient Egyptian YouTube channel. So the first question I would like to ask you is if you would like to tell us about you and what brought you to archaeology in the first place.
I'd always been interested since I was a kid, and then I went to college in Boston and took a class. The museum there was giving classes for college students, so I took a class on Egypt there, and then volunteered in the Egyptian department, and then they encouraged me to go on to graduate school. So I went to Chicago and got my degree, and then went back and worked in Boston for a while, and then eventually went to Atlanta and worked at Emory University in the museum there. And then I took early retirement so I could publish and do more field work.
Wow, but so the question is like, did you know when you started this journey how would the life of an archaeologist be?
No,
Okay.
no, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, exactly. That's that's why I'm asking because people. I mean, you have. I mean, the public has this idea, or I had this idea. You know, when I was young, it's like okay, Indiana Jones, right? No, in reality, a lot of the work is probably. I mean, you should know that. I mean, you should know, but you should tell us maybe. But a lot of the work is actually library and research, right?
Oh yeah, most of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So what is the day life for an archaeologist like you, or like what's your day like? Like what's
Um, well, it's different in the field. Of course, you're working. You get up very early and work most of the day, and then in the evening you probably write and do field notes and catch up on things. So, and out of the field, it's mostly again just doing research and publication and fundraising because that you have to raise money, especially in the States where there's not as much government support as in Europe for excavation.
who do you pitch the idea for an excavation? Like you, how does it work? Like I have an idea, let's excavate in this place, and who do you pitch? Who do I pitch to
Well, first you have to get permission from the Egyptian government, from the Antiquities Ministry.
before the
Uh,
sponsors?
yes, yeah, because you you can't work if you don't
Hmm.
have permission. So that's a thing. And every year you have to resubmit. It's not an automatic thing.
And
So you're always Tinder hooks.
I heard there is a lot of competition in Egypt to actually have a site for you to excavate. Is that true? Or?
Not really. There, the famous sites like Giza and in Luxor, there is competition, but there are many sites all over the country that have been neglected. So it's unfortunate because people tend to um, look in just those small areas, and there's a lot that's under threat to be destroyed. The country population is exploding, and so there's a real push to get as much land as possible. And so a lot of these sites, particularly in the areas outside of the Memphite region or outside of ancient Thebes, are really in danger, and people don't concentrate on them. So that's a part of the problem. So, for instance, Deir el-Balas, it was first excavated by Reisner in 1900 and 1901, and nobody did any work there at all until, as a student for my dissertation, I went there in the 1980s, and then I was asked to go back in 2015 by Mustafa Waziri, who was then chief inspector in that region, because it was under threat from the expansion of the modern village. So, and there are a lot of sites like that that haven't been worked on for a century or more.
Hmm.
And then a lot of
Sorry.
sites haven't been published as well. So a lot of sites that museums and universities worked at, sometimes like Melkata over 100 years ago, that still haven't been, that original work hasn't been published.
Yeah, exactly. Why the, for example, like I was researching about this the Red Ballas, and then I was, obviously, like, you read that George Reisner excavated first, and then it was like I was looking, and then I also have a friend that helps me with the research, and I couldn't find the Reisner documents, and it's like, why are they not published? Like,
Yeah.
why do you think that's the case?
Well, I think in the early days they were busy doing so much excavation, they didn't have much time to publish. But since then, I think, after excavation fell off after the Second World War, people really didn't continue on with publication. A lot of the original archaeologists, died or retired, and then the people who took their place were not so interested in their field work. So
Yeah, but
um,
since he should have write something like his notes and stuff. Why those notes are in the archive of whatever University of California, if I'm not wrong, and like why they're not just accessible to the public? I don't understand. Like, I don't know how it works.
yeah, no, that's a problem in part because a lot of these universities and museums want to keep hold of them because they want to publish them, but they never get around to it. So, and then the other part too is that, for instance, Reisner's work, particularly at Blas, was very early in his career, so the records are pretty poor.
Hmm.
So that's why I really originally had to go back to do fieldwork to understand them, and that's in a large part, a lot of that you have to, in order to publish them these days, you really have to go back to the site and look at it all over again. So
So the reason why they're not published is because there is some jealousies between universities, maybe, that you don't want to open
yeah,
source.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, okay. Well, okay, okay.
But, and
At
then
least
it's
we have
extra
a
work
reason.
because again, have to go back and
Yeah.
do it.
Okay.
But it's a problem because it should be a priority, and it hasn't been.
Okay. Okay. No, thank you for that. I was very curious about. This is something for me to think about as well.
No, it's an interesting question. It's a
Thank you.
good.
Um, let me see. I have prepared like a few questions, but then we can go for the Deir Balas
Sure.
very soon. But um, what makes a person an Egyptologist actually? Like, is just a person that is passionate about Egypt, or what?
I don't know. I think I think for us professional Egyptologist. It's somebody with a degree in the field who publishes and
So
is a serious scholar. I mean, there are people who are enthusiasts who sometimes call themselves Egyptologists, but I think the strict definition is somebody who's in the field who has a degree.
so there is a specialization during the studies, or is something that you do after and then you can call yourself Egyptologist because you actually put your hands in the field?
No, it's specialization.
Okay.
So, and there are few places that teach it. Like I went to the University of Chicago, which is for Egyptology, is the main center in the States. And then even within Egyptology, there's specific areas that you can go into. So you can go into philology, which is the study of just the language, or archaeology, which I do, or art history, that really just concentrates on the art. So within that, and even within those, there are people who concentrate on particular time frames. So,
okay. And archaeology, do you think, when I was reading a lot of, because I've been reading a few archaeological reports and stuff, I always found them to be very, almost like CIA, no, like not CIA, but like a report that is like, it's basically investigation. Like it's almost like
yes, exactly.
crime,
it is very much like crime scene investigation. It's you look for clues, and so it's very similar.
Okay. But I didn't expect that. I was like, okay, let's just go to Egypt, like, excavate and find a dinosaur, whatever. Not a dinosaur, but a mummy, and then try to figure that out. But actually, like when I was reading Petrie as well, and I was like, okay, no, this guy actually is. I'm reading basically a police, like after like.
Yes, exactly. It's the same thing.
Wow. And do you actually study like criminology in your course?
No.
But there should be something in common, no? In your like course.
It is a lot the same, because you look on the ground for evidence. So,
and how does it work? You study like the theory 5 years, and then you go on field. Like how does that career kind of looks like?
Yeah, you do coursework, on the language and the history and related fields. And then, usually it's a master's and a PhD. So it's usually at least 4 years, if not much longer. And then you write a dissertation on a particular topic, and then you go out and try to find a job.
And I mean, it's one of those questions. Do you read hieroglyphs like?
A little. Again, that's not my specialty, so I read them a little bit, but philologists really, that's their area of expertise, because it's it's like, it spans Egyptian civilization 3,000 years, so the language changes very much from the Old Kingdom to the Late Period. If you had an Old Kingdom Egyptian, a Late Period Egyptian probably wouldn't understand a word he was saying.
Okay.
So think about, well, for English, the difference between Old English and Middle English and Modern English, we really, we need that translation for Chaucer and some of these early works, because we don't really understand the language.
But one of the questions that always rises with my friends is like, hey, but how do they know, like the people that study, how do they know how the Egyptians talked, like the sound of the how is it possible do we know the sound of the ancient Egyptian? If we
That's a good question. We don't really. Okay. We guess at it because again, it's changed. So I'm sure over the time periods it sounded differently, but because ancient Egyptian, actually that's really the secret of how the language was deciphered, is that ancient Egyptian continued on. It eventually they started writing it in Greek letters rather than in hieroglyphs, because it was easier. And that language, called Coptic, survives in the Egyptian Christian church. And Champollion, who deciphered hieroglyphs, knew Coptic. So once he had the sound values from the hieroglyphs, he could work backwards from that and understand. And so that's basically how we try the vocalization, but it's very iffy.
Okay, so it's not that if I study hieroglyphs of the Old Kingdom and I try my best to go with the vocals or whatever, it's not that if I go back like 5,000 years, I'm gonna.
They would understand you. No,
No?
probably not.
Okay, so it's not like because there is this movie I remember. I love this movie Stargate, which is very scientific. It's not very accurate, obviously.
No.
Uh, but I love it a lot. It's one of my favorite movies. And like there is the guy like trying to talk with the person, and they actually try like more or less understand each other. And they actually fell in love and no, but okay, so why not starting I know one question before we start with Daryl Balas,
Yeah.
and then you tell me everything. It's look, I've been trying to study ancient Egypt and how they build the pyramids, and I'm not obviously. I mean, I'm an architect, and I have this bias, which is like I'm a little bit of a rational like person, so I don't go with like aliens and stuff. But at the same time, to be fair, it's a big stretch to imagine them building like with like this huge like ramp like. And the question is, how do you think the Egyptians were able to raise the blocks of the, for example, of the king's chamber in Giza? How do you think they were able to raise those like 70 tons granite blocks to a height of 50 meters? Like how is like yeah, you go for it. If you
Well, we think they probably I think the most logical way is that there was a ramp outside a corkscrew ramp outside the pyramid, and they would, as the pyramid would grow higher, they would push the blocks up that way on wooden rollers. And we found blocks in the quarries at Torah that were still on rollers waiting to be transported. So we pretty much know how it was done, and it's just kind of labor organization. I worked with Mark Lehner, who's been working at the Giza pyramids for many decades now, and he found the whole workman's village, the complex that housed the workers who built the pyramids. And so you can see how organized it was. There are these big barracks that are set up for the phyle, for the groups, so the gangs. So they had different gangs to push different blocks and stuff. And they actually apparently they kept kind of a record of who could move the most blocks, in a day or whatever. So it was sort of a competition among them. So it wasn't slavery like we see in the movies, but in fact they ate very well, because we found the commissary for them, and so we know what they were eating, and they were eating quite well. They were eating steak every night because they had to keep their strength up in order to do all this work. That you couldn't starve them.
Yeah, Peter, I this whole like I knew like this answer. Let's say I kind of I mean I'm thankful, but I think like it's still not like it doesn't really, because it answers like we know a lot of stuff about the pyramids, and for example what you said, like we know the workman village, we know like, and that's amazing, and I'm thankful that we know that. But at the same time, the ramp that spirals around, I've been like through a little bit of the rabbit hole, and it seems like the one that spirals up, like from the not the internal ramp, but the external ramp.
Yeah.
There is a problem with that theory. It's like basically I mean, as far as I could understand, you couldn't really check exactly the angle if you had a spiral hiding, but that. How much? Like the question is, how much are we sure about that? That's like in percentage.
I think so. You have to ask. You should ask Frank Monnier. I don't know if you know him, but he really knows so much. I'll send you his email, but he's brilliant, and started as an architect, I think.
Okay.
And he's written about the construction, so he knows the details far more than I do. So and I know that one, actually it's interesting because a surveyor um, pointed out, he thought, because what they do now often is that you have an outside reference point. So in order to keep track of where the angles are, as you say, when they're covered up by the ramp, you work back to a fixed point.
Mm-hmm.
And so he thinks that, as what often they do, is they leave a mound of stone that's high in order to check back.
Mm-hmm.
And so he thinks that's what the Great Sphinx was, is that, if Mark Lehner sort of figured this out, the top of the Sphinx's head was the original level of the plateau at Giza, and all the stone around it was quarried away. This is why it's not older than the fourth dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
All the stone around it was quarried away, but that was kind of left there as a reference point for building the Great Pyramid, of course. And then when they were done with the second pyramid, they decided to landscape it and beautify it by putting the king's head on it.
That's interesting. I never heard about that, about this.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, thank you, Peter.
But again, Frank would know much more. So
okay, if you could then send me the contact, I will. Yeah, thank you a lot. Thank you a lot.
Yeah.
Peter, why don't we start with Deir el-Balas? You agree?
Okay.
Okay. So for the audience who doesn't know, no, you can just do it. You can just talk about it.
Okay.
Freely.
Okay. Well, we're talking about just the North Palace, but it's part of a larger settlement, and so it's actually the one of the earliest royal palaces we still have preserved. So it was very important, and it's located sort of in almost in the middle of Egypt. It's at a place called the Kenna Bend, where the Nile kind of makes this kind of horseshoe-shaped bend on its journey northward, and this is near Luxor. So, and then the site of Coptos is here, and this was an important Red Sea trading route. So it was an important strategic location. And during the Second Intermediate period, around 1600 BC, Egypt was divided. So the northern part had been taken over by a group that had migrated into the delta from Syria, Palestine, and the Mediterranean, and formed its own kingdom called the Hyksos. And so the traditional Egyptian kings were squeezed just into this small area around Thebes here. And then they were also threatened by the Nubians in the south. So it was kind of traditional Egypt was reduced to a very small kingdom. And so the kings of that era built what's called a campaign palace. So a city to sort of a military city, not defensive, but in order to kind of plan their attack on the north to expel the Hyksos. And so they founded, we think probably King Seqenenre of the 17th dynasty, built the palace at Deir el-Balas. We have a lintel inscribed with his cartouche that you'll see from there. And so he created this whole city basically just for the campaign to rid Egypt of the Hyksos. And it's sort of stretched out along the desert edge here, along the edge of the cultivation. And often they, as we'll talk about, the kings, when they built these, what are called royal cities, they would use the kind of pristine desert edge in order to build them. And so the North Palace was at the very center of the settlement, and it was situated in a bay in the cliffs, so a kind of a natural amphitheater in the limestone cliffs. And they would do this, the Egyptians, as using the landscape to kind of as an architectural setting in order to show off the royal palace and the royal prerogative. And so Deir el-Balas actually kind of, I think, sets the pattern for some of the later New Kingdom royal cities. So Malkata, for example, and Tel El Amarna, most famously. And so it's very similar. You have the royal palace in the proximate center of the city, and then houses of the elite gathered around it, workmen's villages, chapels, administrative quarters. So all these things that we know of from Amarna and Malkata really, as far as we can tell, begin at Deir el-Balas. And so the palace itself is situated in a large enclosure wall. The eastern end has never been fully traced, but it's over 200 meters long by about 150 meters wide. And there was some decoration that Reisner recorded. Unfortunately, he just did a rough sketch and not a photograph, and they're no longer preserved, but there were, in the entrance corridor to the palace, were mural paintings of armed men carrying these battle axes. And the palace itself, the central core, was built up on what are called casemate foundations. And these were long, either rectangles or squares made of brickwork, and then they were filled in with dirt and rubble to create an elevated platform. So the palace would have originally had two levels, so a lower level and then an upper level. And it was first excavated by George Andrew Reisner in 1900 and 1901 for the Phoebe Hearst expedition from the University of California at Berkeley. And unfortunately, this was one of the first sites he'd ever worked on, and he was not familiar, as a lot of people weren't, about this kind of casemate architecture. This is the first time it appears in Egypt. It becomes quite standard by the late period for temple platforms in particular. But he hadn't been aware of this, and there had been a later Coptic church or monastery built on the ruins of the North Palace, which is why the site has the name Deir el-Balas. Whenever you see Deir el, it means that there was a Coptic monastery there. So unfortunately, what he did was he cleared off the Coptic remains without much of a record, and then emptied out the casemate. So the New Kingdom upper levels of the palace were destroyed pretty much without a record. So we're kind of left to speculate on what the upper levels of the palace looked like. It probably had the throne room and the private apartments of the king. So this is a reconstruction that a graphic novel about Ahmose was written on, that shows that perhaps what the upper levels of the palace looked like. So the site was operational only for a short period of time, from the reign probably of the second Enrei up to the reign of Ahmose, again, because it was built just to expel the Hyksos. And once Ahmose was victorious over the Hyksos, the site seems to have been abandoned. And here's a lintel from the palace of second Enrei and Ahmose. And this is in the Grand Egyptian Museum. It's great to see, because I've looked for it for many years and not known where it was, and all of a sudden somebody going to the Grand Egyptian Museum found them. So it's nice to see it finally out. There were other. The palace was mostly made of mud brick. It had stone, again, a few stone architectural elements, including column bases, and a lot of the column bases were actually reused. They were taken from temples of the Old and Middle Kingdom, presumably mostly around Dendera, and also they found this in the palace, this censer lid of Sesostris I of the Middle Kingdom. So I think that in part, and we see this even with the pyramids, say the pyramids at Lisht of the Middle Kingdom, went and reused blocks from the pyramids at Giza. So to kind of symbolically show the continuation, the connection with great periods of the ancestors. Also, of course, there was a lot of weaponry found as well. So this dagger and axe blades for the assault on the Hyksos. And we actually have from the site ostraca, that is sort of records written on potsherds that talk about soldiers and provisions for the soldiers and for the ships that went up to defeat the Hyksos. So again, this seems to be kind of the gathering point for the forces of the Thebans that go up north to Avaris, the Hyksos capital, and eventually defeat them. And so we've sort of suggested the reconstruction of the palace would have looked kind of like this, perhaps, with these battlements on top. And this is similar to what we know of the appearance of later New Kingdom palaces, which have this kind of look with these crenellated battlements, which are taken from Syrian architecture. It's called a migdal. So presumably this is what the North Palace looked like, again, on two levels, with courts and corridors and columned halls on the lower level, and then on the lost upper level would be the private apartments of the king. And then what's interesting also is that Reisner found in the kind of abandonment debris of the palace a bunch of these votive mud models. And what's particularly interesting is that they're axes. This is a chepesh sword, a kind of special axe, mainly for cutting people's heads off. But this is the first time it appears in Egypt. This is the earliest occurrence of it, as well as daggers and models ships, as well as jewelry. So we have bracelets and necklaces and these little model flies, which presumably are a military decoration. And what's really interesting about this group is that this reflects the famous treasure of Ahotep, the wife of Second Enrei and the mother of Kamoza and Ahmoza, who eventually expelled the Hyksos. And her burial was found in the middle of the 19th century, and it had all these gold and jewels and objects in the model ships. But everything we see here in the mud models was in actual form in the burial of Ahotep. So again, showing it had kind of symbolic value. And so Second Enrei is killed in battle. We actually have his mummy. Is the earliest royal mummy we have, and he has an axe wound in his head and arrow wounds. So we know he was killed in battle, presumably with the Hyksos. And so she is kind of credited with keeping things together and acting as regent for her young sons until they are old enough to go out and finally expel the Hyksos. So that's why she presumably was buried with all these kind of honors. Then what's interesting also is after the Hyksos are expelled, Ahmoza builds a palace over their old royal capital, and he pretty much copies the palaces at Deir el-Balah. So the Palace G is very similar in design and layout, again with these casemates, as the North Palace at Deir el-Balah. And so I had been interested in settlement archaeology as a student, and people in that time, people were just beginning to get interested in settlement archaeology in Egypt. And so I saw the records in Boston of the Reisner's excavations and thought this was a very interesting site. So I went back there in the 80s and we made a map. There wasn't even Reisner didn't even make a map of the whole site. So there were kind of individual plans of some of the buildings. but they'd never been sort of surveyed and put onto a overall map. So that's how we were able to kind of understand how the site evolved and developed. But now it's threatened by, again, because it's sort of like all these royal cities are, most of them are in the desert edge, but this is a area that is particularly desirable for the modern population to build on, because the agricultural land is kind of reserved, or is supposed to be, for growing crops. So as a result, this kind of borderland is very sought after for building. And there had been a modern village there earlier, but it expanded tremendously in recent years. And so a lot of the site was destroyed and threatened. And here you can see their building quite close to the school, right near the ruins of the North Palace. So this is why we went back there then. So what we've been trying to do is reconstruct it to make it kind of more visible, and hopefully will make it the locals aware that it's an important site and should be preserved. So here we're reconstructing part of the original enclosure wall, and we use modern mud brick, unbaked mud brick, for the same size, and we try to lay it in the same pattern as the ancient brick, but it's stamped with a modern stamp so that people will know where we intervened. And what's interesting is also the blocks, the mud bricks used in the palace are enormous. They're among the largest mud bricks ever used in Egypt. They're 53 centimeters long, so an ancient Egyptian cubit, royal cubit long. So huge blocks of mud. And so here we're, again, you show some of our work. So what we're doing is rebuilding and refilling the casemates, and then eventually we hope to kind of make a platform over it and restore some of the column bases to make it sort of visible for tourists, because particularly in these marginal areas, these provincial areas, the only way these sites are going to survive is if they have some value for tourists, that they can generate some economic value to the local community. Otherwise, they probably won't survive. And here you can see the North Palace, how it's being encroached upon by the modern village here, and then the modern cemetery here. And already a lot of the site has been destroyed, so we're doing our best to try to preserve what was there originally that is still left. So
wow.
So that's it.
Wow, Peter, my God, well, thank you. You're very competent in the subject, and wow, I didn't. I mean, this is my first encounter with an archaeologist, so wow, thank you a lot. I got a.
Oh, you're welcome.
I got a few questions, obviously.
Sure.
Well, first of all, I would encourage every alternative, like whatever history or people like into aliens and stuff, and I would encourage, if you're making some money out of that, please give at least 10% to actually help real archaeology, because real archaeology
Yes.
is not very well funded. Would you agree? Or?
No.
Yeah. So if you would like to talk
absolutely.
about your, if you'd like to talk about that, because ancient Egypt makes a lot of money. They make probably more money on the mysteries than the actual facts.
Yeah.
So you wanna, if you are on the side of the whatever alternative people like history and whatever, you wanna actually help the people like you on the field protecting these sites, because this is
Yes. Yeah.
If you like to tell us a little bit about what does it mean to be the director of the Ancient Egypt Archaeology and Heritage Fund, that would be great.
Oh, sure. So it's so basically, let me see if I can find the notice for it. So Yeah, so basically, we try to raise money through grants or private contributions, through Facebook, through other avenues. So again, because there, especially in the States, there's not much government support. So there are a few grants, but there are lots of competition for them. So we have to try to supplement what we can with private donations, which are sometimes easier to get, but you don't have to go through so much paperwork. And what's useful too is that they provide more flexibility in funding, so you're not tied to particular outcomes, and particularly if kind of emergencies arise,
Hmm.
you can use them. I'm trying to look here if I can pull up.
Yeah, but I still can't see your screen. I can just see your presentation anyway. I'm sorry. Uh,
Oh no, that's okay.
yeah, because this is live,
Uh,
so I'm afraid I really want everything to work, but I don't really see.
yes, well, they can look.
Hmm.
We have a Facebook page and a website, so
Hmm.
let
Yeah, I
me.
will encourage everyone to that would like to support the work of Peter, and not just the work of Peter, but in general ancient Egyptian archaeology, to check the website peterlacovara.com, right? Or
Yes,
yeah.
that's one, and then let's see.
And then there is
Oh, here we
the
go.
Ancient Egyptian Archaeology and Heritage Fund website specifically. So you
Yes,
can always
yep, and
go there and check out the projects
and the
and the
Facebook.
way
Yep.
to donate also. Yeah. No, thank you, Peter. So one thing is, what was inside of the enclosure? Like, because we see that plan, and we see that
Yes.
the casemates were the basic, the
Yeah.
foundations of the actual royal palace where the
Yeah.
pharaoh, like the king, lived. But what's
Yeah.
around, uh, like immediately around, like are those the houses of the mayor or like?
Yes. The there were probably we found a lot of the houses have been destroyed now, but it looks like it's very much like Amarna and Melkata. So there are kind of houses of wealthy, probably court officials. And we found one that was a textile workshop that had all the kind of stuff for making textiles. And we found another structure that was probably a bakery,
Mhm.
um, with grindstones and grain and trays for making bread.
And everything was inside of one enclosure.
No, no, no. Those are scattered outside. The big
Okay.
enclosures seem to be mostly just empty space. So with
Wow.
the palace set in the middle,
So you,
almost kind of like the Marna temples.
but you would imagine to be empty space because you will have a lot of army there prepared in case to defend the.
Perhaps, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
and
it
also
works like
probably
a base camp, like in the ultimate case that anybody can just protect. Like you want to protect, like you want to have that place to be the ultimate fortress.
yes,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Presumably they weren't so worried about the
Hmm.
Hyksos, but
Hmm.
I think still they were. They were.
And so you think so? This is actually the layout of the future royal palaces.
For the New Kingdom, yeah, yeah, I think it
Wow.
sets the tone. We don't know so much about in the Middle Kingdom or earlier.
Hmm.
There's some similarities to there's a Middle Kingdom palace and fortress at Ornarti, and there's some similarities to that, but really this kind of sets the
Hmm.
tone, I think, for the royal cities of the New Kingdom.
Have we got anything from the old kingdom?
No, no. I mean, we have Mark's Workman's Village, and we have a few other isolated small segments of communities at Elephantini, um, elsewhere, but no palaces and no large cities.
Mm, okay. Okay. Well, we got the tombs and pyramids. basically.
Yes. Supposedly, there's symbolic palace at the Step Pyramid complex, but
Well, the funerary complex, the Joseph
yeah,
funerary complex. Okay. Well,
yeah. And we have
but do they
a
people?
gateway at Hierakonpolis of
Hmm.
a palace, but just the entrance part.
I think no, I don't actually know that
Yeah, the
one, but
famous
okay. Yes,
Nitsch
it's.
gateway.
I think
Yeah,
I got you. Yeah, I think I got which one you mean. But like, quick
yeah.
question about the funerary complex of Djoser. Is that people
Yes,
they didn't live there? That's just a tomb, like a huge big tomb.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But it's parts of it must symbolize, we think,
Hmm.
symbolize, actual real structures,
Yeah.
but not in stone.
Okay. Okay.
And you see, it's amazing. You see, like there's a picket fence that's done in stone. It's really incredible.
Yeah, like the part where you had like a lot of like chapels with a door that doesn't lead
Yeah,
anywhere
yeah,
because it's blocked. Like yeah,
yes, yeah. So it's just like a stage set. Yeah, yeah,
yes, it's the same, exactly. Well, and also you have like those snakes, which does the same job as the one you were depicting in your images here. The snakes,
yeah.
I don't remember the name.
Uraeus,
The
yeah,
ureas. Okay, yeah, those ones. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So I would imagine the king to have a lot of childs, like Ramses, like 90 people, like 90 childs, like 90 sons and daughters. And I wonder, um, how would you accommodate like a family of like, let's say 10, 15, 20 people, I don't know, in just this small, right, place? Like, it's not too big, right?
No, well, I think again, it's just the campaign palace. So I think the real royal palace was still in Thebes, was still in Luxor,
Okay.
and this was really just for the campaign against the Hyksos. So I mean, probably the king lived there, and maybe the queen, but I think the bulk of the family and the bulk of the court was still in Thebes itself.
Okay. And do we have traces of that specific palace in the Middle Kingdom in Tib or not?
No, no, we don't have. We have just little bits and pieces of ancient Thebes
Mm-hmm.
town, but
Okay.
no palaces. We have houses, but
Okay.
no
Okay.
palaces.
Well, that's great to know. That's great to know. No. Okay. Look, our time is like running a little bit short at this point, and there is some problem with the
Uh-huh.
cameras and stuff. So let's maybe not risk it, and let's go towards the conclusion. First of all, really, again, thank you a lot for this presentation. It was amazing and really clarifying.
Sure.
Uh, one very quick question: did the bathroom? Do you think they had like the bathroom inside, or they obviously had the bathroom outside, right?
Uh, again, we don't because a lot of the we don't have traces of a lot of what was there. So I mean, you do have bathrooms at Melkata. So and we see them also in the temple palaces, which are represent again like the step pyramid complex.
Mm-hmm.
In the mortuary temples of the New Kingdom, you have kind of little stone model palaces, and they actually have bathrooms as well. So there may have been, but we don't have a trace of that for the North Palace anyway.
How much do we know about domestic residential architecture? Can we actually say that we know how the Egyptian lived in those houses, or we can just guess?
A little bit, a little bit. I mean, that's what people nowadays are more looking into um, than before. We know that again, like and our work here confirms what we've thought from say from Tel Amarna and elsewhere, is that there are there's a combination. So you have uh, often people have their houses, but that's where also they work. So
Mm-hmm.
they combine kind of official duties with residential.
Mm-hmm.
So and then often they have craft production associated with the houses. So you'll have maybe not every house, but you'll have an area for textile
Mm-hmm.
manufacture, for baking,
Mm-hmm.
for leather work, for whatever is
Mm-hmm.
needed.
And
So
okay, So do you think like
And then we do have kind of indications of what there are specific like bedrooms and kind of living or reception rooms, kitchen areas. So we do have those that are pretty identifiable as well.
but basically three main functions, like where you sleep, where you present yourself to the guests, and where you
Uh-huh.
cook a little bit, right?
Yes. Yep.
But
Basically,
but
yeah.
kitchens were not really a thing, right? The kitchen, like I will imagine you would, if you were living in ancient Egypt, you will go to the main like baker guy, like, and then you will take the bread, and then you bring it home, and then you eat with your like people. Like you don't really cook at home, right?
We do find like a bakery ovens in a lot of houses, like at Darul Medina, say, and then also out front of the houses. Also, there were often cooking
Ah,
installations.
okay.
So a fire pit or
And
whatever.
do you
Where
think those were rich
so a
people
lot
or
of that
just
was done. Sorry.
so do you think those were wealthy people or just the normal?
Um, Probably most people. I
Okay.
think. I think that because there's not a lot of. I mean, I think certainly this is the case at Nalkata, where for the king, bread and stuff like that, food is made outside and brought in.
Hmm.
But I think for most other people, it was done in the house itself.
Wow.
I'm sure they went out and got
Yes.
bartered for food,
Yeah.
vegetables and fish and
Yeah.
meat and stuff like that. But
Is it true they didn't eat fish, right? Because the fish was actually sacred for Osiris. Because
no, that's from Herodotus. But
okay,
so a lot of that is no. They actually ate a lot of fish. At Giza, we found
okay,
a lot of fish bones
yeah,
and we see pictures of them drying fish and
okay, yeah. I remember because I read that part of the book of
yeah,
histories, and I was like, oh, really?
yeah.
I was fascinated. Even the big, how do you remember the bird? No, no, not this, the oh, I don't remember the name of the bird, the legendary bird that comes every 500 years in Egypt, or the
Oh, the
phoenix.
phoenix.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Amazing. Look, I want to conclude with two more questions, and then I'm gonna leave you with your
Yes.
amazing Saturday. I hope.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
the first thing is a question regarding a site in Egypt, which is Hawara, and it's in front of the pyramid of Amenemhat III, which is this known to be the place that Amenemhat III would have built his big labyrinth. Okay,
Yeah.
so I have a friend, is Louis de Cordier, and he is a Belgian artist, and he went in 2008 in Hawara and did some scans with the National Institute of Research and like astronomy, astrology, I don't remember, astro something in Cairo,
Uh,
and they did the GPR and they did other like techniques, and the scientific team of the expedition claimed to have found some anomalies down there in the like 10 meters under the ground, uh,
mhm.
which would correspond to the thing that Herodotus was talking about, a two-floor labyrinth. It was not just the ground
Uh-huh.
floor, but also the underground. And Petri went there, and he says that he found like the foundations. But if you do a ground floor, like if you do one floor building, yeah, you can find the foundations. But then the underground floor, you don't need like foundations for that floor. It's all underground. So the question then is to you, like my question to you is, do you first of all do you know about this mission that was done in 2008, and what do you think about it if you know? Or,
I know that people were working there recently, but I haven't read much on the reports of
okay,
it. I know it's an amazing site, uh,
okay,
and yeah, and sadly very destroyed. But nobody's really done. It's great that they're working there because nobody's really. Again, this is another place that you would think would have been investigated, but really hasn't been since Peter's day. But yeah, I mean, there certainly could be more of it. It's kind of like the Azarian at Abydos, which is an underground component of larger temple. So um, again, we don't know. There could be, doesn't have to be 2 stories. There could be a lower part next to a ground level part. So, but it's great that they're working there because it's such an interesting, important site, and very little's been really done.
Well, they're not really working there anymore. They
Uh-huh.
used to, like, they did this in 2008, and then
Uh-huh.
they tried they applied again to the ministry, and
Uh-huh.
for some reason that never really happened anymore. And yeah, and the thing that sucks is because the pyramid of Amenemhat III is flooding. It's not
Yeah.
anymore, and it sucks because the internal chamber is done by like, the main chamber is one block. Like it's carved.
Yeah. Yes.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Those are incredible. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I will tell Luis about. I mean, yeah, he's a friend of mine, and I
Okay.
really wish the Hawara site would be saved from this problem of the flooding. And then if we,
Yes. Yeah.
if we find the underground level of the labyrinth, great. If we don't. But he has a point, and yeah. Anyway, okay. I just wanted to know what you think
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, they should try to go back again, especially now they're so interested in they
Hmm.
like to make big discoveries because it promotes tourism. So
Yeah.
I'm sure if they presented it that way, I
Hmm.
think they might get permission.
Okay. Well, great. Okay. We can talk. I can tell to Luis. And look, the last question: what is the site that you haven't excavated yet that you wish you would excavate? And yeah, and
I have enough on my plate already,
wow.
so I don't think I'd go anywhere else.
Ah, okay, okay. You see, you've done it all. you see,
Yeah.
you've seen it all. But now, come on, that there should be like not a place maybe, but there's something like the tomb of Alexander or the tomb of Cleopatra or Imhotep even, or like there.
No, no, I'm not interested in famous stuff.
Wow, cool.
So maybe in Sudan I would like to work, but that's certainly not possible these days.
Okay. So you're actually not like seeking these famous people of the past.
No, 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 no.
Wow, that's fascinating. Can you tell me
Yeah.
more? Like what is that triggers you about what it did in the past? Because now you're not going anymore. But
Uh-huh.
what was the motivation? Like what did you? It's just the fascination of like
Yeah, I'm more interested. I think again because I trained in that, so I'm more interested in daily life and regular people,
yeah.
not necessarily the.
I actually would agree with you because we know that like yeah, I actually would agree with you. I would find surprising that
Yeah,
we always study like these big like kings and stuff, but actually
yeah, yeah,
the things that we are actually interested in, like yeah, but I want to know how they lived. I want to
yeah.
know
Exactly.
their values. I want to learn from them, even if
Yeah,
that's the useful part of archaeology and history.
excellent,
Because I don't care.
absolutely.
Okay, well, we found the tomb of Alexander. Thank you, great.
Yeah. Yes.
That's amazing. But if but well, thank you. I mean, Jesus, we really had a lot of questions. Peter, I'm really thankful. You really clarified me.
Oh, you're welcome. No, it's
Really,
nice to talk to you.
thank you. I appreciate. Well, for anybody that is listening, I thank you for listening to the podcast. And yeah, I don't know. The next time, whoever will come to the podcast, maybe Chris Norton, because I'm in touch with Chris. And but I told him let me study more because I don't want to do a podcast without knowing stuff. I want to do like
Yeah.
something like Peter, keep in touch. It was great, really.
Yes.
Thank you a lot.
Yeah.
I will end
Thank you.
the live now, and then we can talk a little bit backstage.
Okay, sure.
Okay.